And I did keep trying to find an answer. And I'm glad I lived long enough to find this one because I am never going back.
Jane, how did you find carnivore?
Well, I actually heard that term probably 15, 20 years ago when paleo first came out. Um, but I didn't pay much attention to it because my history with dieting was typically Atkins. That was the only thing that ever really worked. So I'm thinking, oh, I don't know what that is. I'll stick with Atkins. And then the beginning of this year, it was either January or February, a friend of mine said, I'm about to go on a ketogenic diet. And I thought, I think I know what that is, but I really didn't. So oddly enough, my last job was in substance abuse prevention, and we often talked about gateway drugs. And when I started looking into keto, I quickly discovered carnivore and heard that keto was the gateway to carnivore. So I got a chuckle out of that. And I had been doing low carb most of my adult life with intermittent success. But I found that as I got older, it just wasn't doing it. It was not working. And I thought, what am I going to do? It's the only thing that's ever worked. So I got a hold of Georgia Eads' book as soon as it came out. Because I looked into keto and I'd come across Chris Palmer's work, and then I learned about Georgia Eid, and her book made sense and went into the nutrition, which I needed that education. And the more I looked at it, it just was more confusing than I needed. It was keeping track of this, and you can't do net carbs, which I had always done because net carbs meant you could eat more. So I finally decided, why don't I just do carnivore? It seems so much simpler. I don't have to count anything. What can I lose? I'll try it. I decided I'd try it for 3 months. Now I've just passed 2 months. So I'm early days with this. And I have very high hopes because when you watch interviews with people, they get such miraculous results. And I have a feeling, due to my age and maybe my epigenetics or whatever, that some of these results are going to take me a little bit longer. And as I said, it's only 2 months. But I've already had some really good benefits, one of which I never expected in my entire life. And I'll be happy to go into that. If I can give you a little history, I'm the fourth child of 6 kids, and we were well fed as babies, but it's as if once you became a toddler and you walked and talked, you were kind of on your own, and food was really hit or miss growing up, and often used as punishment and withheld. And my mother started working PMs as a nurse. So there was often nobody except my father trying to put supper on the table. So I remember being hungry as a kid, and my go-to was to get raw oatmeal, sugar, and milk, and get a bowl of this mishmash and hide behind a living room chair and scarf it down as fast as I could. As soon as I learned to light our pilot light on the gas stove, I started cooking. And the family seemed to breathe a sigh of relief because now somebody was putting dinner on the table. I might have been 11 or 12, something like that. And I put together pretty good standard American meals, but not a lot of sugar because we never had desserts, we never had candy, we never had cookies. So I became a baker because that way I'd have cookies and brownies, and I graduated to pies and bread, and it became a really big part of my identity. I read cookbooks as a kid. I mean, food was my focus. And I forgot about that until just a second. So I became the family cook, and Uh, did all right in high school. I never ate lunch as a way to keep my weight down. My mother was uh, obese all of my life, and like a kid in an alcoholic home, you say you're never going to do what your parent did, and I went ahead and did it, and I ended up as big as she was plus. So the added wrinkle is on somewhere around 1995, I was first diagnosed with clinical depression. And 95 was a crap year, and it took about a year to find some medication that worked. And I was told it was a chemical imbalance, and I bought that. I never asked why is there a chemical imbalance, um, which would have been smart because my first career of several was nursing. Um, so I finally found something that worked. I was asymptomatic for 25 years. Um, and then along comes 2020, and we all know what happened in 2020. But this was before that was even a news item. I could feel myself losing ground, slipping emotionally, and I wasn't sure what it was about. And then right around the end of February 2020, I got triggered by some negative financial news, and it's like I went downhill within hours. And that night was the first time I was suicidal, and I felt like a total failure because of this. It was an investment. It was a 30-year investment that I had discovered was going to pay a pittance. And I just felt like a total failure because by now my identity is wrapped up in restoring old houses. That was my love, and I let myself do it thinking you will only succeed if you follow your passion. And I did for many, many years. But this last time, it wasn't going to happen. And my brother was living with us at the time, and I asked him to take me to the hospital, which he did. And they didn't do a whole heck of a lot, but they didn't want to admit me because I'd never been admitted. So I went home, and now I start trying to find something that's going to replace the med that worked for 25 years. And 2020 became a year of multiple hospitalizations, multiple medications. If anything worked, it only worked for a short period of time. So I would say I was most of 2020, and I'm not somebody who doesn't love life. When I'm feeling good, I am outgoing, I'm energetic, I'm full of ideas. I love to do projects. I love to get out and about with people, and I could barely get out of bed. And it's so interesting what I've learned about your signals being off when your brain is inflamed. I felt like I had a plug in my throat and I could not eat except for about a half an hour at the end of the day. If I hadn't had to go to the bathroom, I would not have gotten out of bed. It was it was awful. It was so bad. Finally, uh, things started to turn around early 2021. I happened to be a veteran. I was a Navy nurse. Do not thank me for that. It was a big mistake. However, politically, I changed radically when I came out of the military. And it was the early 70s. So you can imagine which way I went. But I have access to what we have here, the Veterans Administration. I have access to medical care. And I have to say, they have been terrific. People love to slam the VA, but they have been terrific. And they worked with me. And we finally found a combination that took a long time to get right. However, we finally found this combo. And so I am on 4 medications, which I would dearly love to get off. So my why for doing carnivore is get off these medications. And of course, because of that, I'm on blood pressure medication because there's a weight issue, which doesn't seem to go down. We know the whole drill, the whole metabolic thing. So I start watching everything I can about this, and I'm gearing up for it. Now I'm a leap year baby, and I just had my 18th birthday. This was a big year. So there was no way I was going to try this before my birthday. So we get past the 29th of February, and I haven't had my blood work done yet. So I arranged for the blood work, and they were very cooperative about doing all that. The only thing they didn't do, and I don't know why, was fasting insulin. So I got that additionally on my own. But the week before I started this, it was like my last meal. It was boxes of chocolates. It was ice cream. It was like, this is my last chance to get my fix. And I now know, having been off carbs completely, what a sugar addict I was. You know, it was my higher power. You know, it ran all my thoughts. It ran all my plans. If I ever had anything nice in the house, I would squirrel it and hoard it and eat it myself. Because growing up, I would have 5 siblings that I had to keep it from, and I still had that sick behavior. You know, so that colors a lot. Along the way, I think it was 2013, I had to have my thyroid out. And I have to believe that if I had discovered this sooner, I might have avoided that. You know, I had thyroid blood work done on a regular basis because that often goes hand in hand with depression, but the levels were never a problem. It's just that all of a sudden I get this growth on my neck. And even though I'm not far from salt water, I got a goiter, you know, and there's a terrible old Three Stooges routine about a goiter, which one of my docs reminded me of one day. He had a great sense of humor. So I had the goiter out, and as I said, I was doing okay until 2020 when the bottom fell out. So round about 2022, I'm stable again. I'm happy again. But it just bugs me that I'm on all these meds. And the more I learn, the more I think maybe I don't have to be on them. You know, it started to come out that what was maybe causing these imbalances, you know. And as soon as I discovered Chris Palmer and Georgia Eads' work, it's like, I have got to try this. Now, so I turned 72 in February. I believe it's never too late. And I don't know if you've ever seen the video with old carnivore Steve. I think he's 82. And his lovely wife, Cynthia. He is adorable. And he just started this, you know. So there is always hope. There's always hope. And in addition to getting off the meds, of course, I would love to get some weight off and get off maybe the blood pressure medication. What I did at the beginning of this, I had to wait from a doctor's visit, but I don't get on a scale because it'll screw with my head big time. So I've decided I'm only getting on a scale when I go back to see her. In the meantime, I decided to take measurements. So at 2 months in, I've already lost probably 3 inches around my waist and a couple around my hips, which I am really heartened by because I think that's got to be visceral fat, that I'm losing, that I don't know that I would have lost any other way. I didn't know I had brain fog because I have an older sister who has a really crappy memory, and she's the one in the family with the bad brain. So in comparison to her, I didn't think I had it. But of course, that was the first thing. All of a sudden, I'm thinking, wow, I'm thinking a whole lot clearer, to the point where I was with a friend one afternoon and she suddenly had arm pain, and all of my nursing training from 50 years ago was suddenly right there. I knew exactly what to ask, what to do. It turns out she probably had moved funny and it had nothing to do with a heart attack, but I knew what to do. And as a nurse, I was never real confident. So I thought, I was driving home from that. I thought, well, that's really interesting. And I have found I love to think creatively. I love to problem solve, and that's right back, you know. So I think my brain's working pretty well. Oh, I did want to say, my younger sister, who I wrote to you about, who's the retired internist, she was the first person I ever heard talk about inflammation as more than just a cut on your finger. I had no idea that your whole body and your whole brain could be inflamed, and it could take so many forms. Um, that never came up in my training. Uh, so when I started to hear about brain inflammation, I thought, well, that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. And depending on what your Achilles heel is, that's where your symptoms are going to show up. So for me, it's brain. For somebody else, it's joints. For somebody else, it's autoimmune or diabetes. I was probably pre-diabetic. I'm sure I was, because they kept telling me my A1C was getting a little high. So that's usually a clue. So my younger sister has been a real asset. And when I didn't get the one fasting insulin test, she ordered it for me and I got it done. So I now have all the blood work, and I can't wait to see the next time I go to the doc. I can't wait to see what the results are. These values mean so much more than they ever did.
What a change. Congratulations.
Thank you. You
So
helped.
oh, thank you. So, how difficult was it for you to get started with this? I mean, if you're as a carb addict myself, um, i I've had so many false starts over the years
Yeah.
getting to this point. How was it for you?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one of the amazing things. I was terrified of keto flu. So I thought, I'm going to do this gradual. I'm not going to be a jump in with both feet person. So the first week I got rid of the processed, the seed oils, all the obvious carbs. I used up the veg in my fridge and my freezer. I used up the fruit. So probably by week 2, I was off all of that. Now dairy's another issue, which I'll come to, but I did not find it difficult to adjust. I think I was just really ready to do this. I did get electrolyte supplements. I had no keto flu. Now maybe I will down the road. Maybe I'll have oxalate dumping down the road, but I have not had any of that. Thank you, God. Um, so I think for me, the best way was to ease into it. Dairy's been tough. Only a week ago, I decided, let's see what happens if I stop drinking coffee. Now, I wasn't a huge coffee person, and it turns out it was only a vehicle for half and half. I love my dairy. So after 5 days, I thought, oh, maybe I can have a cup of coffee. So I have a cup of coffee. It tastes wonderful. And the next day, I am sneezing, draining, blowing my nose all day long. And I thought, well, now I know, no more half and half. And I did not have typical headaches getting off that either, which really surprised me, because in the past, that was very common. So the transition really has been pretty easy. I thought I would be bored with a limited menu. Turns out the less types of meat I eat, the better I like it. I find chicken and pork boring without all the breading and the sauces and all the fancy stuff I used to make. So I rarely eat that. I might have bacon. I don't even like bacon as much as I thought I did. I'm finding hamburgers are kind of rich. I tried this best ever baked chuck roast, it's just too rich. I can't get it down, So I'm on 4 fried eggs in the morning. I've tried hard boiled, soft boiled, um, and I like them fried. And my secret, and I've never heard anybody else say this, I fry them in chicken fat, and they are incredibly good fried in chicken fat. Now you ask, where do I get the chicken fat? My older sister, my younger sister are both doing this. So I have a lot of family support. And because my older sister has some disability, I make her meat for her because she lives with one of my 2 vegetarian brothers, and we will not ask him to make meat. So I've been cooking chicken and roast and getting cold cuts from the supermarket and stuff for her, so my brother doesn't have to cook meat. He's surprisingly supportive, although he is not open to any of the information about veg and fruit. But he wants to cook for her. He wants to be helpful. So he'll make stuff. So she's really more keto. I think she's given up any obvious carbs. He's big on quinoa, and brown rice and, pastas and stuff. And she's given all of that up. So more power to her. So my fried eggs in the morning and chicken fat, oh my gosh, makes me so happy. And then it's usually a steak for dinner. So it's, around 10, 11 in the morning, 5 or 6 at night. One of the best things is I'm no longer eating late at night, which is good because that was really bad when I was in 2020, and that was the only time I could eat. So I'm no longer snacking at night. So I'm naturally doing intermittent fasting, 2 meals a day, without even trying, because it is so satisfying. And I can't believe I'm not eating the quantity that I used to. I used to be able to put away mashed potatoes or pasta or rice, with the best of them. That blows me away. That blows me away. But the biggest gift so far is the freedom from any sugar cravings whatsoever. When it was like the reason to be before this, and now I rarely think about it. All I care about is, do I have a steak for tonight? I'm good. I never cook steak much, but I've gotten pretty good about cooking my steaks, but just the freedom from that demon sitting on my shoulder I never thought it would happen. I absolutely never did. And this was the first Easter that I could go in a grocery store and not eat certain things that I would eat every year, because that meant a treat at Easter. And I just looked at everything and I thought, this isn't food. And I thought, who am I? What, who is this person? Because I never had any control whatsoever before. So if I got nothing else from doing this, that's the greatest gift I could ask for. And of course, having an addictive personality, I want what I want and I want to go off the meds. But I think that's going to take a while. Now, I have a wonderful healthcare team through the VA. I have a nurse practitioner. I love this, psychopharmacologist. She's not a pharmacologist who's psycho. She's a psychopharmacologist. And I have a health coach, all really wonderful people. And the most enthusiastic from the get-go was the pharmacologist. And she said, "What do you want to start reducing?" And I thought, already, So we tried. We took the most troublesome med, which it's it's not a difficult med, but its side effect, let's just say it jams you up. And I was on additional meds to keep things soft. And that's what all I'm going to say about that. So that was the one I wanted to get off of first. And we did try to really titrate the dose, get it a little bit. And I found I wasn't ready. I just became really uncomfortable and really short-tempered, and I'm already short-tempered. So I don't need to be more so. So I went back on it. But for all those fiber freaks out there, what are you going to do without your fiber? I have to tell you that even on that full dose, even off the softener, I don't have a problem. I don't need the softener anymore. So I can live with that for as long as I have to. I think it'll just take more time, because it's almost 30 years that I've been on some medication for that. So I don't think that's going to disappear overnight. And as I say, even if it never does, what I've gotten so far, I am grateful beyond belief.
Considering you're only 2 months in,
Mm.
these are some pretty massive changes. I mean, I feel this as well. You kind of live your whole life, you've got all these addictions, and then all of a sudden you realize, "Oh, I can just turn it off?" You mean, it's just like flipping a switch? It's
It
kinda
feels like
crazy,
that.
right?
Yeah, it feels like it. And I know I watched one of your videos where you share about your year. Congratulations. Um, my husband and I are both in recovery. We've been in recovery for years. And I've tried all kinds of ways to attack this, this demon. Um, and I've made a lot of success in some other areas. I mean, I credit our 50-year relationship with recovery. Um, and I have a terrific guy at home. But this one, I didn't think I'd ever get on top of this. And one of the awarenesses I've had is how much self-shaming I have done over the years related to this. And now I feel like, not that it wasn't my fault, because I put the food in my mouth. I'm not abdicating responsibility for that. And I did keep trying to find an answer. And I'm glad I lived long enough to find this one, because I am never going back. I am never going back. And for somebody who was so into food and cooking and all that, I've given away any baking pan that I can't cook meat in. I kept my cast iron, because you got to have your cast iron. I gave away all my spices, all my baking supplies. It previous. I don't think I could figure. I don't think I could imagine who I would be without that part of my identity. And now it must have been time, because it just let go. And so I haven't done the Redmond salt thing yet. I'm trying to be cautious, but I can't say it's lion, because there is some dairy, but it's basically beef, eggs, water. I never liked water so much. It's like I'm becoming a connoisseur of water. What is that? We have access to really good water. And I just learned today, I was watching a Paul Mason video. I love Australians, that? I love Australians. And I met a bunch of them in Vietnam years ago on a trip. And I mean, they're just awesome people. But he was talking about triglycerides, and he happened to mention something about dairy, especially in women, can cause insulin resistance. And I thought, you're taking my dairy away. But so be it. So it's like I'm ready to do that. Now, where I'm currently staying, I bought some groceries because it's not my house, and there's some dairy in that refrigerator. But when I finish that up, that will be it. And I don't worry that I'll backslide because I have this proof, this 2 months of proof that this is just too good to give up. It's just too good.
Yeah. So for someone watching who is, they think, oh, well, this all sounds very nice, but how can you possibly have just, some eggs in the morning, you can have a steak at night, and you can feel full? Like I need to be eating something once every couple of hours, or I'm in trouble, or I'm going into some kind of episode. How do I how how is this possible?
I think if you have been on a lot of carbohydrates and you're used to needing to feed yourself every couple of hours, it's very hard to imagine not doing that. Um, I'm thinking of an Australian actor. He was in The King's Speech. Jeffrey Rush. Jeffrey Rush.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm not very big on
that's all
movies,
right.
but yeah.
Well, I quote him. There's a line from Shakespeare in Love that I quote all the time. I quote movies, and this one is, "Although it's a miracle." How does theater come together? Although it's a miracle, and I don't know how this happened. It feels like a miracle, and I think it's because I'm finally eating food that is doing what I need, that is satisfying, and I cannot force myself to eat more than that. Now, 4 eggs sounds like a lot to somebody who has two and toast and, you know, bacon and orange juice and coffee and on and on. Um, I can't believe four is my limit. I can't do more than four. I don't know how people do six or whatever. And when it comes to a steak, I can't put away 16 ounces. I can't physically do it because my signal says it's stopped tasting good. You've had enough. So I'm just trusting the process. I'm trusting the process. But I absolutely understand somebody coming off the other ways of eating, not being able to imagine they could do it. I didn't think I could either, you know?
Yeah, just when you're talking there, I'm thinking like, I guess you can also explain to people like, you've got to understand something about the way I'm eating versus the way you're eating. I'm eating food. You aren't. It's like
You may
it's
think you
it
are.
it's called food, but it's not food.
It's not food.
Yeah.
It's not food, you
Uh,
know? Um, and, you know, maybe it's timing. I mean, over February, I did a 15-week online um, compulsive overeating workshop. And I think that helped to put me in a place where I was ready for this. And I really think you need a really good reason to try it. Um, so my approach with friends, and I love Dave Canyon. I'm out. I'm as out as I can. I just love that. I am not out yet. I want I want the results to speak for themselves. I want to do it attraction, not promotion. But it's hard not to promote. It's really hard not to promote. But I want things to, and people are starting to notice. I couldn't shake the idea that maybe this is inflammation, and maybe I'm not going to get over this easily. So that tying in with the psych meds became my why. So if I tell other people anything, if they ask, I say, well, it's kind of an elimination diet. I've stopped eating processed food and seed oils and sugar and starch. Nobody can argue with that. Nobody's going to give me a hard time with that. But once you go a little bit stricter, then they start to, all of their stuff comes up and they start putting that on you, you know? And I'm not going to convince anybody. They have to convince themselves, you know, that they're ready or they're even willing to try something like this, just as I had to be. And I have two nurse friends, and they are very opinionated nurses, and they're plump. We'll say they're plump. And I know I'm going to get the hardest time from them. So I ain't saying nothing until I get my second batch of blood work. And they will not be able to debate the blood work, you know? So that's my ace in the hole.
Yeah. I think you raise a good point. You know, when people are pushing back about carnivore, often, you know, we can feel we take it personally and we feel like, oh, I
Yeah.
should just not talk about it or whatever. But actually, it says more about the other person, you know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that's their insecurities around food, or that's their stuff coming up, you know, when they're talking, when they're denying it or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. And, you know, I've lived long enough to not take it so personally. I did at one time, but, and I think if anybody's interested, I would ask them if they have any health issues that they're concerned about, or something that runs in the family that they're afraid of happening. And then if they're willing to look at a video, find a video with a doc that addresses that specific problem, and then they've got buy-in, you know. Um, Now, interestingly enough, in 2 weeks, my older brother, vegetarian, and I are going to France to see my younger brother, vegetarian, for 2 weeks. Typically, he comes here. We're making the trip there, and that's going to be interesting. However, they've got great butter. They got great eggs. They've probably got better meat. Um, I'm I'm going to provide my own food, and it'll be outside the normal meal times, so it won't get in their way. Um, I'm pretty comfortable resisting the bread and the baked goods. I've been to France. I've had an almond croissant to die for. I know what it tastes like. I don't need another one. I don't need a baguette, you know. I know what baguettes taste like. I'm not a big drinker, so I could care about the wine, you know. I mean, that's where Evian comes from, right? So, you know, I'll be happy with Evian. Um, so I don't anticipate problems traveling, which is another gift because in the past it would be, what kind of new foods can I try, you know? And the desserts over there are wonderful, but not for me anymore. And I don't feel like I'm deprived or I'm missing anything, whereas in the past I might have. So I really think it took 72 years for me to be ready for this, you know? Now, I have to say, I live with one other person, my dear darling husband. And I say that with all sincerity. But he has had serious gut issues since his early 20s. And he lives on chicken, vegetables, fruit, and almonds. And he will not hear any suggestion coming from me. He is stubborn and he's got his beliefs and he believes them strongly. So he's my biggest challenge not to promote. Um, I bought the whole fiber thing. Fiber's good for you. I never knew until I saw an interview with a lovely British guy who ended up with a colostomy that vegetables go right through your system to the large intestine, and then they sit there and ferment and cause all the problems we know they cause. And I look at my husband and I think, oh my God, you think red meat is what upsets your stomach. And I think we've got it backwards. But I just have to be patient and bite my tongue and be the best example I can be of, how this can work. I know he can't ignore the scent of steaks cooking in the kitchen, because he'll show up in the kitchen door, and oh, oh, he'll go through the dog. He'll say, Luna thinks that smells really good, you know? So, yeah, Luna and who else, Um, you know, and once I learned about oxalates, it's like, oh my God, he goes through bags of almonds. He would probably have a lousy time with oxalates, but ain't my body.
Yeah. I mean, from personal experience, almonds are not good for your gut. It's yeah,
I know,
really,
I
really, really
know.
bad for your gut. But,
So yeah,
as we talked about, it's, everyone will come to it on their own, at
if they're
when they're
meant to,
ready. Yeah,
if they're meant to, you know.
yeah.
Um,
So,
so,
where
um,
where where do you see this going for you now?
oh well, there's no turning back for me. To be free of the kitchen, I mean, I spend no time there. And I don't even mind. I mean, I lived in the kitchen. So this is like a whole 180-degree reversal. But, as everybody says, my shopping list is really short. I know exactly what I want. I avoid most of the aisles. Um, I check out, and I don't find it all that expensive, because we used to eat out a fair amount, and I tended to be a people pleasing tipper. So I would tip generously. I'm not spending all that money because I don't eat out anymore. I'm not throwing away food. I mean, I belong to a community supported garden, and I was getting all this great organic stuff and throwing it away. I couldn't keep up with it. Not because I didn't like it. So I'm not spending that. Not eating out, not eating at fast food places, which I tended to do. Um, and I look for bargains. I wish I had a grocery store like Dave Canyon, because he can go in and go to the cut rate. There, it's all in one place. I have to sort through, the meats. My next trick, instead of buying chuck roast, I just paid $17 for a small chuck roast because my sister was footing the bill. But I think I could get the same result with stew meat, and I wouldn't have to pick it apart at the end. So I'm going to cook stew meat the same way I've been doing this 3-hour chuck roast, and see what happens. And she'll eat anything I make. And I bought a package of 8 chicken thighs for $4 yesterday. So the chicken, I got a lot more chicken than the beef, and the beef was four times the price, you know? So it doesn't have to be expensive. I love Ken Berry. If you can only do hamburgers, hot dogs, and spam, it's still better. And luckily, I am in a place where I can treat myself. And that's another thing. A lot of the work I did over the years was with self-esteem, because I never felt worth doing anything nice for myself. And I finally tipped that scale. And I know that the better I treat myself, the more self-esteem I'm going to have. So, I mean, there's such a tie in between food, um, and your brain, your psyche, the way your beliefs. I have to say, my older sister has been a wonderful source of paradigm shifts for me. And she taught me an invaluable tool for challenging painful beliefs, which is one of the best things I know. And I look at people and they are married to their painful beliefs. They think that's fact. They think that's their reality. And it doesn't have to be. So, I feel like at this point in my life, all the work I've been doing came together. And in this nice, easy, receivable package. And I'm looking forward to the next 25 or however many years, I'm a lot more hopeful. I'm grateful. Are you kidding? I'm so grateful to be here at this time while this is happening and be part of the grassroots. Now, I do have to say one thing. I typically find the carnivore community really wonderful. And I think because they're healing, you don't have the rancor that there seems to be in a lot of the population these days. But one thing, I guess this is kind of a spiritual part of this. I've always been a particularly sensitive person, particularly around animals. And one of the hardest things for me to see is a truckload of animals going to the butcher. It just made me sick, and it made me feel really guilty that I was eating meat. This is long before carnivore. And I thought, if I ever had to kill my own food, I don't think I could do it. I've heard one or two carnivores, and I don't remember who, so I'm not naming names, but they said something about, if you feel sorry for the animals, grow up, stop being a baby. And I thought, oh, I don't think that's what people need to hear. So, but I took that statement and I said, all right, what does that mean for me now that I've become a carnivore, for crying out loud? And I decided, all right, here's my gray area solution. I now believe that this is the best way for me to eat. I also believe that we all serve a purpose, animal, vegetable, mineral, and we all die at some point. I live in a, believe it or not, rural part of New Jersey, and there are a fair number of people who produce their own meat out here. So I'm thinking it behooves me to buy my meat local from people who are raising it properly, who are caring for the animals, be grateful for it, thank the spirit of the animal any way I can. And my happy medium is I don't eat baby animals. I haven't eaten veal or lamb in probably 40 years. I will never touch another suckling pig. It's like, come on, can it at least have its first year of life, So I don't eat baby animals. And I just try to really be thankful. I'm not a religious person by any means. I am a spiritual person. And I need to be grateful that somebody gave their life for me, so I could feel the way a human being is supposed to feel, So
Yeah, very nice.
So that's my little soapbox.
Nice. So, Jane, how can people reach out to you? Do you have a
Well, I
social
thought
media?
about that. I'm not technically savvy, but I do have an additional email address that I haven't been using. I was using it for things like eBay when I was selling my last house. So I can give you my email address. I will check it every day, except maybe the next 2 weeks when I'm over in France. But and even over there, I'll try and check it. I'd be happy to talk to anybody. I'd be happy to field, if I've made a connection with somebody and they would like to reach out, absolutely. Absolutely. I think if we all support each other and encourage each other, we're going to change things. We're going to change things,
I
and they
I
need
agree.
changing. They.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
not for nothing, but thank you for your videos. I absolutely love them. I learned something unexpected from every single one of them.
So, Jane, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure, and David's an honor, truly.